Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge, and not many people on YouTube are talking about this. This is absolutely a monumental victory for President Trump and his administration. Like I said, like I kept saying for months, the Supreme Court will continually side with President Trump. Article 2 of the Constitution gives Trump the authority to do what he's doing. Hit subscribe to this channel right now to my super chat. Thank you. In a couple of seconds, you will hear President Trump and others. I'm going to explain really quickly why this is such a monumental defeat. This is a Courthouse News article. Supreme Court gives Trump win, blocking teacher funds, stuck in anti-organizational framework. We'll just say roundup. Democratic states say teachers training programs in Chicago public schools and public university in California were already imperiled by the loss of the grants. On the surface, one would think that this is really bad. Who doesn't want to fund schools and universities and programs like this? Like all of the wonderful, morally superior programs that Democrats pat themselves on the back over, a lot of this money makes its way to non-governmental organizations or political action committees or corporations or individuals for anything from consulting to other business-related activities, where you have organizations or political action committees or non-governmental organizations that have the same ideology. And somehow, some way, the money goes back into the Democratic Party or funding local Democrats. So you might have a teachers union, you might have a school district that gets a major grant, millions upon millions of dollars. That money might find its way to organizations, political action committees, non-governmental organizations, individuals who might then just donate directly to the Democratic Party or through political action committees. So all of it, Elon Musk explains it a lot better than I do. Some of it, not all of it, a lot of it goes to good things. Some of it is part of a racket. But here you have, while temporary restraining orders aren't typically reviewable, the majority said the ruling below was similar to a preliminary injunction. Treating the application as a stay pending appeal, the court agreed to pause grant payments until the case comes back to the justices on the merits. And when it comes back to the justices on the merits, they will look at Article 2 of the Constitution. The precedent has already been set. These courts, especially with this victory, President Trump cannot be stopped from doing what he wants to do within the executive branch. The Department of Education is within the executive branch. Supreme Court lets Trump suspend grants to teachers. As with all of these headlines, you're not getting the entire story. The Department of Education is within the executive branch. Trump is the commander-in-chief, leader of the executive branch under Article 2 of the Constitution. A lot of the money is funneled through very creative means to policies or to ideologies that have nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do, political and other types of ideologies. A lot of the money is funneled to organizations or individuals that have nothing to do with teaching students. So that's the problem here. USAID did a lot of great things. Unfortunately, all that money was bundled up with $20 million for Sesame Street in the Middle East, or over $100 million for contraceptives in the Middle East. All the things that Democrats can simply fund again through foreign aid packages. But they're too embarrassed of the expenditures that Musk discovered. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Let's get started.
Committee Chairman Jim Jordan is urging the Appropriations Committee to use, finding bills to limit the ability of these rogue justices to misuse nationwide injunctions. Anyway, here with more. Chairman Jim Jordan is with us. Mr. Chairman.
So Congress can also defund or limit the funding of these courts. That's one way Trump can win. But he's already gotten the Supreme Court precedent here. This is huge, though. Let's continue.
To me, it's just an extension of lawfare. To me, this is what they can't get done at the ballot box, what they can't get done legislatively. They go out judge picking, they find the right judge, and they get their injunction, and here we go.
Yeah, it's a fundamental question, Sean. Who gets to decide? The 77 million people who showed up on Election Day, voted for President Trump, knew what he said he was going to do. He's now doing that. Do they get to decide, we the people? Or is it some district judge, some unelected district judge who gets to make the call? And that's just not how our system works. And then when you think about it, it's an unelected district judge who gets to make the call for the entire country right now. And so we have legislation, just like Senator Grassley is going to have in the Senate. We have legislation sponsored by Representative Issa, which would say the same thing. District judge, if you have a ruling, an injunction, it applies to the parties in the case in that respective jurisdiction. It doesn't apply nationwide. We're also looking at the appropriations process, and we're doing oversight like we did today at that hearing. All three levers we have in the House, in the Congress, to put pressure on the judicial branch to do it the right way.
There are over 600 federal judges in 90 regions of the country. You can't have unanimous opinion, a unanimous consensus or viewpoint. Democrats love the word consensus. If anyone disagrees with them, they're not an expert anymore. But you can't have an you'll hear AOC in a second repeat almost verbatim what Jim Jordan and President Trump and others are saying. You simply can't legislate through the judicial branch. And that's what's taking place. Lower court judges are doing what Democrats can't do in Congress or the presidency when they had it. Okay, Democrats don't govern. They just pass monumental, massive spending packages, and then they pat themselves on the back and look in the mirror and say, we're so moral. We cut childhood poverty. You created the poverty because you shut down and kept everyone indoors and didn't allow anyone to work. You shut down economic activity, and then you preemptively pardoned the people who pushed to shut down economic activity because they almost certainly engaged in massive criminal violations. And then you said eviction moratorium. You prevented people from working. Obviously, they can't pay their rent, genius. Then you say, we cut childhood poverty. You caused the poverty. You wouldn't allow the parents to work. So then the poverty became worse. Then prices increased 20% in the 4 years that Biden or the people around him were running the country. 20%. Then we're not talking about interest rates, mortgage rates going from less than 3%, a lot less than 3%, to over 6 to 7%. No wonder people can't afford mortgages. You have young liberal Democrats who are married, and they say, well, we can't have children. We don't want to have children. It's too expensive. Oh, okay. Well, then why do you? It's one of the reasons is the economics or the financial concerns. Well, then why do you vote against your interests? You keep voting Democrat. Interest rates went through the roof because they ignored inflation that they created. So inflation increased prices by 20%. From when Biden took office, which we had zero inflation. How could we have inflation? They shut the economy down. But even before that, we had lower inflation. And then the apoplectic hysteria, the stock market, the same people who kept saying, well, the stock market's not that big of a deal. And why do you care about eggs? Are the same people now saying, the stock market. And then when the stock market goes up, they'll say, well, it's not that big of a deal. So they don't believe anything they say. They don't believe anything they say. It's the same old racket from Democrats. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Oh, okay, things are better. Well, let's go to the next thing we can hyperventilate about. But anyway, let's continue.
Okay, let's talk about what you think Congress can do. And if, in fact, the House and the Senate can come up with a bill they agree with, okay, that means this would all go away, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we got to get it passed in the Senate. I think we can pass it in the House. We got the majority there. Of course, in the Senate to pass legislation, you got the 60 vote hurdle. You need the supermajority. But maybe, again, we've had justices like Justice Kagan who have said that this shouldn't be the case where one district judge can apply an injunction that impacts the entire country. So you even have justices on the left who've said this is a problem. So maybe we can get to 60, get this legislation passed. But we should continue to do oversight. oversight, continue to highlight these decisions that seem so ridiculous, like Judge Boasberg saying, bring the bad guys back to the country. Terrorists, gang members, trendy Aragua gang members who've done terrible things, bring them back. That makes no sense. So highlight that as well. And finally, look at the appropriations process, the power of the purse to impact this as well.
Okay, so there was a lot of talk about either one bill, one big beautiful bill, or two bills to get the president's agenda across the finish line.
Yeah.
We have new developments tonight, and that is that as Senate Budget Chair, Lindsey Graham believes he does not need the approval or permission, and there is precedent for this, of the Senate parliamentarian to get reconciliation passed. What is the status on that?
So this is on X. I don't have X. I don't have Instagram. I don't have anything but this YouTube channel. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a spokesperson. Of course, I'm joking, but this is a spokesperson, apparently a spokesperson for the Trump administration. Her name is AOC. She's a Democrat, but apparently she's a spokesperson for President Trump. Check this out.
Afternoon, a couple hours ago, what did you think?
Well, you know, I think rulings like this, and I think we've seen from the FDA and also from activity in Congress, that some of these rulings, I think we've been preparing and anticipating for there being these egregious overreaches by members of the judiciary appointed by a right-wing Republican Party whose goal for a very long time was to just pack these courts with partisan judges, often underqualified or completely unqualified for their role. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy.
Did AOC just say that she believes the Biden administration should ignore a lower court ruling? Let's listen to this again. I wouldn't want to put words in anyone's mouth.
For their role. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts.
How is this not replayed every single day on every social media account belonging to anyone that's the Republican Party, every conservative on the planet? How on earth is not this replayed? President Trump on X and on Truth Social should replay this every day, just every single day. How do we live in a country with 300, who knows how many people now, 360, after the Biden administration, who knows, but with 350, 60 plus million Americans? How do we live in a country where there's this amnesia? This was only 2 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. How do we live in a country where, this is why Democrats disown friends and family. This is why they view everything to be this moral crusade. This is why Democrats view their political party or their ideology, many Democrats, not all, to be almost an atheistic political religion where they worship their own emotions. Because so many are so ignorant, they're so utterly ignorant of what their own politicians espouse, what their own politicians state categorically. She didn't say, well, I think maybe. She says, absolutely, here for everyone to see. The Biden should ignore the lower court. When Trump says that, then now you have Democrats saying, oh, the rule of law, nobody's above the law, except everyone preemptively pardoned by Biden. My God, you'd have to be a complete imbecile to believe the nonsense, the absolute unmitigated nonsense coming from the left of center, the hyperventilating hysteria all the time, and then they don't even realize that this happened 2 years ago.
Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts.
They're engaged in an erosion of the legitimacy of the courts because AOC doesn't agree with the rulings. Okay. If Trump were to say that, it would be, oh, this is what authoritarianism looks like. This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is what fascism looks like. And it's like, oh my God, the Democrats, the most totalitarian political party, because they govern through endless bureaucracy with an iron fist. You couldn't get more authoritarian than Democrats, but they do so in a very clever manner. They do so in a very, very clever manner, in a very deceitful and disingenuous manner. But let's listen. This is unbelievable. The courts are legitimate only if, I mean, it's a bunch of word salad, but only if the courts rule in the favor of a liberal Democrat or a progressive. Then the courts are legitimate. If Trump were to say that, it would be the end of the world.
It is this ruling. I think that we, roll. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that we, the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies.
Then you have just the best rebuttal, or, I mean, thank God Anderson Cooper pushed back. And this is one of the rare moments where we can all see a cable station that is firmly on the side of Democrats doing something for posterity, for future generations to see. This is amazing. Who knew that Anderson Cooper and AOC, well, mainly Anderson Cooper, he did the right thing here. But AOC, who knew that she would,
lies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But do we want to live in a world where a government can decide to ignore a federal court ruling?
Well, no, of course. I mean, I do think that it raises these important questions. And I do think that when we look at, and there are serious questions that the FDA and the Biden administration is going to have to figure out and how exactly we map this out. But on the other hand, what we are also seeing is a power grab over our courts, in which the laws passed by Congress and the rules and policies passed by the executive branch now are going to require unanimous consent from 650 district court judges.
So don't enforce them. And what? Unanimous consent? This is exactly what Stephen Miller has been saying. This is exactly what Stephen Miller has been saying. This is exactly what President Trump has been saying. AOC says it in a brilliant way. Why? If there's anyone that is in any way close to President Trump that possibly watches this channel, which, might not be the case, might be the case, who knows? But if you could please get President Trump to play this clip, not necessarily from this live stream, but just the CNN clip. It's the AOC stating, it's on X. It's CNN Politics on X. This is public domain. It's for everyone to see. This is unbelievable, and it's so important. And yes, you have to listen to AOC. It's like a homework assignment. It's like a homework assignment on modern American history, the past 2 years or so. It's not fun, but it's a homework assignment, and everybody will learn from it. President Trump needs to, every single day. Don't talk about, speaking about specific judges, when you have Democrats literally stating, don't enforce it, even if the judge rules it, don't ignore it, don't enforce it, and, we need a consensus. Stephen Miller wasn't even saying all of this. Neither was President Trump. Neither was Pam Bondi. They're a lot more diplomatic than this. Let's listen to this again.
Look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interesting thing when it...
And God bless Anderson Cooper. He did the right thing here. Anderson Cooper did the right thing. Okay? He did the right thing. God bless this man for doing the right thing at that moment.
What does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But do we want to live in a world where a government can decide to ignore a federal court?
And the issue of enforcement was, she basically said, you don't have to enforce it. You rely on the administration to enforce it. Okay. The only repercussions really are political. You can't, even the Supreme Court, the repercussions are political. The electorate would say, my God, Trump is not, any politician is not listening to the lower courts. But the average American is so tired and fed up. They're so fed up of the deceit and the doublespeak and the euphemisms and all of the nonsense and the changing of viewpoint within months and years of Democrats. So Trump could actually say, we're not listening, and most Americans wouldn't care. You'd get the public relations polls. Oh, my God, media would be hyperventilating as always, but he'd still win. He'd win a third term if he was allowed to.
No, of course. I do think that it raises these important questions. And I do think that when we look at, and there are serious questions that the FDA and the Biden administration is going to have to figure out and how exactly we map this out. But on the other hand, what we are also seeing is a power grab over our courts in which the laws passed by Congress and the rules and policies passed by the executive branch now are going to require unanimous consent from 650 district court judges, many of which are appointed with even, the American Bar Association saying that they're completely unfit for the role.
How many Trump supporters at the American Bar Association? I'm just wondering, how many people walking into an American Bar Association, event with a "Make America Great Again" hat? I'm just wondering. So this was a huge, huge victory. And these are, of course, grants, just like, the same type of funding as USAID. And, you're getting $65 million in this case. $65 million. How much of the $65 million do you think actually educates, as opposed to indoctrinates, as opposed to, funds Democratic campaigns? That's why Democrats are keying Teslas. That's why they don't realize, they think it's like morality. There's nothing, the shtick, the belief that Democrats have that they're so moral and just is rooted in immense ignorance. There's no acknowledgement of the massive waste and fraud at USAID, for example. There's no acknowledgement that most Americans don't want $20 million for Sesame Street or bizarre Island of Dr. Moreau experiments on mice. Most Americans don't, but the Democrats won't legislate. They can tomorrow. You don't need these grants from the federal government. You don't need the Department of Education to give 109 grants for $65 million. AOC, Schumer, anyone in the Senate or the House on the Democratic Party side can tomorrow fund, write a bill. They have the power of the purse. Oh, but they funded the Department of Education, and the Department of Education doles out the money. It's like, yeah, that's the problem. Most Americans have no clue where all this money's going. That's why we have a $1.8 trillion deficit and 30 plus trillion in debt. It wasn't just the endless wars that Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Kerry, Biden, Clinton got us into. The same political party, the same uniparty that the Democrats long for, and the never Trump Republicans long for so much. Oh, it's such a good time. It was so good when, the status quo kept hurting the country and hurting lives around the world. But see, again, the morality is the Democrats view everything to be moral because it's an atheistic political religion or political theology, rooted on a bunch of things, including the worship of their own emotions. They love feeling morally superior. That's why they're kicking cars and keying cars. I'll show you what you're doing to innocent people. Oh, what's this? USAID was actually implicated in trying to influence the politics of other countries and funnel money to non-governmental organizations linked to Democrats, essentially funding Democratic campaigns. Oh, a money laundering racket that Doge and Musk and Trump found out? Did you know about this? No, I'm busy keying a car. Can't you see I'm helping humanity? Let's continue.
With America's wise man, our friend Victor Davis Hanson, Article 2, Section 1, the first sentence says, the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. Then I dare to turn to Article 3, Section 1, the first sentence says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Seems to be a little bit upside down, does it not? We have about 700 of these federal district judges. Congress has created the districts. They've created these judges. These judges are there for life. Nobody knows who the hell they are through the process. They don't stand for election like a president of the United States. The president's in the Constitution. It says what his authority is. These congressionally created judges are in there. How has it come to be that a single federal judge with two law clerks in some city in America can issue a national injunction telling the president of the United States, you turn those planes around with those Venezuelan criminals, rapists, and murderers in there. Why? Because I said so, and I want to take a look at it. How did that happen, Victor Davis Hanson?
Well, it was an organized effort. Right now, Judge Boasberg's the most powerful man in America, Mark. He's controlling the national security policy of the United States. There's about 330 or 40 of these liberal judges. They're cherry-picked by these well-financed groups. It's all a symptom. They don't have a counter agenda. They can't say, this is what their Democrats stand for in the border, crime, the economy, etc. They lost the White House, the Congress, they lost the Supreme Court, they lost the popular vote, the electoral. So this is a reaction to their impotence and irrelevance. And they use street theater on one hand, destroy Tesla by basically terrorism, swat people as home. And I got swatted where 3 sheriffs showed up at my home from a fake 911 call. Wow. And then they go to this impotent Congress, and they use potty, smutty mouth videos or ninja boxing. It's just pathetic. And then they use the judiciary, and they create 4 or 5 of these ultra-liberal judges, and they become, for weeks on time, the most powerful people in the United States. It's sort of delay, eat up a year of the Trump administration. Mueller did it. We did it when he was in the wilderness with lawfare for 4 years. But they don't, it's all a symptom. They have no positive thing to contribute to America. No, let's work with Donald Trump and see if we can compromise and take credit for it. That's not who they are.
I love Victor Davis Hanson, Mark Levin. They're awesome. Victor Davis Hanson is fantastic. The Democrats lost everything, but they didn't lose their indignation. They will never lose that. That is fuel for them. It is absolute fuel for them. So, and that's the problem with the Democratic Party. They don't have any actual. There's no actual policy. There's no actual policy that they stand for.
Showdown.
There's no actual policy they stand for. It's just the only thing they stand for is opposition and a quest for political power. That's it. That's it. That's all that they stand for, is a quest for political power. That's why they canceled people. It wasn't about morality, because Biden has said and done worse to all types of people, all different people. Biden was accused also. They don't care. It's about the number of accusations now. And then, of course, if any Democrat is accused, don't believe them. Don't believe the person. And then, of course, there was a nasty, sinister, nefarious, evil public relations campaign against the person who accused Biden of actually literally what was stated in a hot mic that they still think is a deposition, which was not the case at all, never happened. But anyway, we can go on forever. The hypocrisy is just unbelievable, but they don't care. They just don't care.
On Capitol Hill, Republicans trying to rein in the power of federal judges as legal battles go on over President Trump's agenda.
Time and time again, rogue judges have asserted, as though they were 5 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court.
Republicans on this committee are sending a message to anyone who dares to stand up to Donald Trump. If you step out of line, they will target you next.
Our Constitution did not create a plural executive or judicial tyranny. Today, we're far too close to both.
If President Trump's agenda is as popular as he claims, he can work with his allies in Congress to convince the American people to support it.
He already did. He won the popular vote, the House, the Senate, every battleground state.
Who gets to make the call? Is it the guy whose name was on the ballot, or is it some bureaucrat? Is it the guy who got 77 million votes, or some district judge?
Trump and Musk have been systematically violating the Constitution and breaking the law to trample.
Then why did the Supreme Court side with Trump over the Colorado ban, on immunity, now just with teacher grants, Chevron deference, what else? Dobbs, January defendants. I just named, 6 Supreme Court victories for President Trump. And the Supreme Court is tasked with what? Oh, interpreting the Constitution. Judicial review. Let's continue.
The rights of the people.
Let's bring in Sunday Night in America host Trey Gowdy, former federal prosecutor and House Oversight Committee chairman. Trey, thank you for coming on. I would just want to get your thoughts on what we heard out of the hearing today, because we've heard so much about these nationwide injunctions, and the message from Republicans is beginning to resonate with the general public that the courts are, being used as a tool of the left at this point.
Well, first of all, let's take a step back. Both sides have enjoined presidents from doing things that they didn't like. It's just a much bigger scale right.
So you have what? 79 injunctions? 79 for Trump? 64 in his first term, 15 in the second term? They have tried. Donald Trump has to be one of the greatest Americans for pushing an end to this, to endless wars. That alone makes him the moral imperative. Okay, the moral case, the morality always leaned towards Trump. If Democrats disown friends and family because of moral concerns, so moral. Why are they okay? Why do they not care at all about never-ending military conflict? Why was that nation invaded under Biden? Why not under Trump? And now Trump is trying to end nuclear confrontation. Doesn't want to send Americans everywhere to intervene in military interventions. He's the anti-war choice that alone makes him the moral choice. It was a moral imperative always to vote for Trump over Clinton, over Harris, and over Biden. And we know also we tried Biden for 4 years. Trump won in a landslide. So Democrats had Biden for 4 years. They lost everything politically. Even Jimmy Carter probably did a better job than Biden. And that was 12 years of Republicans after Jimmy Carter. But you have people who disown friends and family. You have people who put politics above family and friends. And I mean, what kind of individual does that? Well, perhaps an individual who's completely ignorant of all the corruption. And the type of individual that doesn't know that Fauci, for example, was preemptively pardoned for a reason. Everyone around Biden, the January committee, preemptively pardoned for a reason. And if Trump had done that, they would say, well, why is he doing that? Obviously, it's admission of guilt. What is he afraid of? Well, now it's Trump would go after his political opponents. You mean the way that they went after Trump, except this time Trump would have actual evidence of criminal behavior? You think it would be easier to indict and imprison the people that Biden pardoned or people around Trump who were already indicted and they found nothing? Where is this no collusion with the Kremlin? That was a fake, phony, absurd hoax. He didn't try to, commit a rebellion. The Supreme Court overturned the Colorado ban. So tell us what Trump did that was so horrible. Aside from completely taking a wrecking ball to the status quo. The status quo is very corrupt, very immoral in many ways. So the moral choice was always President Trump. The anti-war choice, great for the economy. We had record low poverty with Trump, record highs in household median income. The tariffs are a good thing for a number of reasons. You want to rebuild American manufacturing. Imbeciles. I mean, people who are hyperventilating about the stock market. You need to rebuild manufacturing before AI robots take over everything and there's zero middle class. And then Democrats pontificate about social safety nets, and we have no money for it because they've bankrupted the country through inflation and interest rates hikes and all that, which is what happened under Biden. And allowing, again, I love, hardworking, God bless them, immigrants, undocumented, documented, but the point is you're allowing millions upon millions of people who are competing for the same jobs as Americans who are, facing poverty. So it's like Trump was always the morality was always choosing President Trump over the indoctrinated, morally superior intellects who don't understand the corruption within USAID, the fact that Democrats don't even have a functioning primary. They cheated Biden worse than they cheated Bernie.
Now, and if you dive into the numbers, it is usually Obama, Clinton, Biden appointed judges that are enjoining the president. So the math is pretty simple. To become a federal judge, you need 50 senators plus the vice president. To become the president, you need 270 electoral votes. So they're really not equal with one another, Jackie. And if you think about our legal system, the higher up you go, the more people you have to get to agree with you. If you're on the Supreme Court, you got to convince 4 other people to agree with you. If you're on the Court of Appeals, you got to get one other person to agree with you. As a district court judge, and I used to work for one, I got a lot of them that are friends, but you can do it by yourself. So I don't think that's what was intended, and I think the public doesn't like it, so you're going to see reforms, not impeachments, but reforms.
Listen to what Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal said today. I want to get your reaction.
If you try to eliminate birthright citizenship, jail people for free speech, slash funding and fire people, and eliminate departments that are actually established by Congress, if you try to use Cold War era regulations to do...
Who cares if they were established by Congress? Trump is head of the executive branch. So...
mass deportations, then you're going to get nationwide injunctions. So maybe if you don't like the injunctions, stop doing the illegal stuff.
That's not what AOC says. That's not, look, you can listen to that right here. AOC disagrees.
Heard the news this afternoon, a couple hours ago. What did you think?
Well, I think rulings like this, and I think we've seen from the FDA and also from activity in Congress, that some of these rulings, I think we've been preparing and anticipating for there being these egregious overreaches by members of the judiciary appointed by a right-wing Republican Party whose goal for a very long time was to just pack these courts with partisan judges, often underqualified or completely unqualified for their role. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that
So one member of the squad disagrees with another member of the squad. Isn't that interesting?
I mean, isn't the court supposed to determine whether something's illegal? I mean, did her last line hurt the Democrats there in their argument?
Yeah, well, I mean, so who says we have birthright citizenship? That was a Supreme Court decision. And just like the Supreme Court has changed its mind on other issues, the only way to...
So this is interesting right here. This is also Senator Wyden making a long-winded, very actually eloquent case. This is on Facebook. I don't have Facebook, but it's public record. A very eloquent and verbose diatribe on why you shouldn't listen to these lower courts, especially the Biden administration shouldn't, because they're manipulated specifically to get a conservative right-wing, ruling. We shouldn't listen to that at all because it was court washing and some other euphemisms he uses. Listen, this is really, really, really interesting. This is Democrats. These are Democrats saying things that even Stephen Miller has never said.
On the federal district court, he has earned the title of the most lawless judge in America. It's tough to earn that kind of infamy in a short time, but his rulings have justified it. He has issued constitutionally dubious and extraordinarily contentious opinions. He's defied precedent on protecting LGBTQ employees and attacked the right to contraception by restricting minors. With Judge Kaczmarek, hotwire the judicial branch. They could ensure Kaczmarek was the only judge who'd get the case. No shot of it getting assigned to anybody else. To make this more frightening.
Sound familiar, Democrats? Shopping for judges in districts that are favorable to ensure that you get a liberal decision, only to be struck down yet again by the Supreme Court. Yet another loss for the morally superior, highly intellectual.
Kaczmarek tosses out FDA approval. Americans can't count on the appellate courts to step in and do what's right, do what's constitutional. The appeal would land at the activist Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is the same court that allowed Texas Bill SB 8, effectively an abortion ban, to go into effect before the Supreme Court ruled on Dobbs. From there, any appeal would presumably head to the very same Republican majority on the Supreme Court that overturned Roe. The Roberts Court doesn't even wince at revoking constitutional rights and upending decades of precedent on legal grounds that are flimsy. By the way, at this point I want to note it's a fairly recent phenomenon that a single judge even had the authority to issue a nationwide injunction. Until 1976, 3-judge courts were required to enjoin federal and state laws. Even after that, was no longer required. It was relatively uncommon until about a decade ago to see federal laws and policies blocked in their entirety by the ruling of one district court judge. Now, it's true that these type of injunctions have been used against both Democratic and Republican administrations. The difference here is that the appellate courts, and particularly the Supreme Court, are aiding these polarization efforts, but only for one side. So some numbers. On 41 occasions, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to put on hold an adverse lower court ruling for the duration of the government's appeal. In 28 of those cases, the Supreme Court granted the Trump administration relief. In comparison, the Biden administration has sought emergency relief from the Supreme Court 9 times. The Supreme Court's granted it on only 2 occasions.
That's because, as the Congresswoman you heard recently stated, stop doing the illegal stuff.
The court has granted emergency relief against the Biden administration 4 times, something that didn't happen during the lawless days of the Trump administration. So what does that mean for the case in Texas? Well, if and when Judge Kaczmarek issues the ruling that he was hand-picked to deliver, Mr. President, the court washing is on. The Fifth Circuit, which has little respect for precedent, will almost certainly uphold his ruling. Then the Roberts Court will almost certainly leave the ruling in place through the long and arduous appellate process. All the while, millions of women will suffer grave danger. The harm that will result from this
So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you see the hypocrisy. It's just absolutely unbelievable. You see the difference in tone. The difference in tone when it is, and in terms of vantage point. When Democrats don't get what they want, they don't want to listen to the lower courts. When they're in power, or when they're out of power, the lower courts serve as the last line of defense. Okay? And they have nothing else. So the Supreme Court just issued a huge, huge victory. And you heard Ron Wyden. The Supreme Court routinely sides with Trump. That's because he's on the side of the rule of law. If the Democrats cared so much about the rule of law, they would look at recent Supreme Court decisions. But they don't. They're the ones intimidating the Supreme Court. Chuck Schumer went after the Supreme Court, and then somebody almost took the life of Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh. So, I mean, it's like, it's really unbelievable, the hypocrisy. Russell! Thank you, Russell. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you, Russell. Be here tonight for the live stream, everybody. To my super chat, thank you, Russell. Greatly appreciated. I will have a live stream around about 10 p.m., maybe 9 p.m., not sure. But be here, and I will see you later this evening. Thanks, everybody. Have a great, great Saturday. Thank you so